Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, whenever you are watching or listening to this. We're grateful to be at another podcast episode of Trending Up and grateful that you guys have tuned in either to watch or listen. And here we are, Edgar. We're doing we're doing things a little differently. Where we started off this podcast, we were talking about it about what, 3 years ago? And now
Almost,
we're going
almost.
almost three
Yeah,
years
we're coming up on February, which I think we started February of 2019.
2019, and
So
it'll be
pretty
February
crazy.
2021. Yeah, it's crazy. 3 years, which has been just a journey, a lot of fun to connect with people that have listened to it, and also just for us, for our growth, for our sanity, to be able to just have a place where we can go, just come and talk and play a different role. And so, yeah, with that, I was just saying, it's just crazy because we started off recording once a year. I mean, once a year, once a week, then two times a month, and now we're transitioning another transition into one time every 6 months. No, I'm kidding. No, it's not. We're doing once a month. We're wanting to give you just some good content. Our lives have gotten hectic and crazy, as I know a lot of people, especially post the lockdowns and quarantines, at least here in the States. And so, as we have transitioned back to full time again, and just Edgar with kids, me with dogs,
I have
work.
my own people. Have you
You,
seen that reel? Have you?
I don't think I have. I don't think I have.
But yeah. Anyways, I've made my own people, and my own people are tough to be around. So I
Oh
I
man,
apologize for everyone for if
no,
I've
you're
been in
good.
your
You're
life,
good.
and I've
You're
been
good.
anyways.
But
So
yeah.
yeah, it's good. It's good. So as we've been part of this podcast for 3 years,
Hmm.
we've gone through different phases, and
Hmm.
those that have listened, and you can see in our library, we touch different aspects of what it means to walk with Jesus, to trend
Yeah.
up with
Yeah.
Jesus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And today we're opening a new like phase, or a new we're flipping the page per
Hmm.
se
Hmm.
in our podcast development and journey. So we want to thank everyone for following us, and we hope that this is a blessing. So, Sebastian, what are we going to be doing in the next few months?
Yeah. So we'll be covering something. I guess we're calling it foundations. It's something that the conference here is doing, at least my region here, and they're going through the foundations, which is what are the main the biggest core beliefs or elements of what we believe as a denomination, right? And so they're calling it foundations. And when we started off the podcast, right, we wanted to make practical. We wanted to make Christianity and our faith and make it practical for other people. So we're going to be spending some time on some of these core tenets. They're usually divided into five. Obviously, if you are somewhat familiar with the Adventist Church, you would know that we have 28 doctrinal beliefs, but we tend to say that there are five S's that we hold to be true, that maybe are distinctive from what other denominations or religions teach. And actually, I guess you could say six, but it's that would be salvation. It would be the Sabbath, right? Seventh day, second coming, the state of the dead, and what do we believe about the state of the dead? Spirit of prophecy, and the sanctuary. So the S's of what we believe. So that's what we're going to be covering in the next couple of episodes. Just kind of what we believe and what it is, what it isn't, and why it's important for us today, right? And really just trying to break it down into common language and to show the importance of it today. I don't know if I did justice to that, Edgar. You can correct me or add
Yeah,
anything that you think.
well, for many people in our audience, you
Mm-hmm.
are connected. You listen to our podcast because you come from a religious background, or
Mm-hmm.
you grew up being taken to church, or you heard about God at home. And
Right.
our motive for our podcast is to lead people to, well, to equip you to walk with God, with
Mm-hmm.
Christ. And um, as in our specific flavor, so whenever you're talking to religious people, denominations is a fancy word to say different churches,
Good.
or within the overall religion of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And I would liken it to, denominations are like flavors. And
Okay.
when you're, if you like juices, there's different types of juices, right? Different
Mm-hmm.
flavors of
Mm-hmm.
juices. And specifically for the Adventist flavor, there are some particular
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
pillars or foundations, like you already mentioned,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that are important for the Christian perspective, the Christian, no, excuse me, the Adventist perspective, the Adventist like tradition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to bring baggage with the word tradition, but uh, Adventists do have their traditions.
Mm-hmm.
We're not
Mm-hmm.
exempt from it.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, today we thought, what is the first foundation that we want to start with? And we decided salvation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
um, a question that we naturally then ask is like, what does it mean to be saved? Or
Mm.
have you heard the question before? Are you saved? Or when were
Yes.
you
Yeah.
saved?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sebastian, elaborate on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, different what's it called? Different denominations, as you were saying and describing. Thank you for that. Will kind of ask that question, right, when they're going through life and going through things, and just ask, hey, hey, when were you saved? What day? Do you remember the exact time? And that's kind of as Seventh Day Adventists, we don't really communicate in that language per se. We do have, like, I guess, I don't know, what some important dates. Maybe your date when you got baptized is important, right?
Mm.
But we've kind of taken the approach that it's like, um, it's a journey of a lifetime, right? So maybe you might not be able to look back at a certain day and be like, that was the day. That there was moments, right? Now we talked about, I think, our testimonies at some point in our come to Jesus moments, where it was more of like a progressive set of moments, right? It wasn't just this one moment. There was a moment that you kind of began to like, oh, and then you're like, oh yeah, oh Jesus, yeah, and this and that, right? And so it was the different steps that when you look back, you look like it was, it was different events, different moments, different conversations you had, or things you heard or listened to. uh, and so that's kind of the conversations you'll hear, right? Are you saved? When were you saved, right? And you had an interesting comment to that you read from someone, right?
Yeah, yeah. So for those that followed in the Twitter universe, if you are
The
on
Twitter
Twitter,
universe.
you can find a lot of trash on Twitter. Honestly, social media, like anything, can have its very toxic,
Yeah, yeah.
aspects. And I'm on Twitter, and I enjoy scrolling every once in a while. I
Hmm.
really limit myself from trying to scroll too much.
Too much, yeah.
And I forgot which theologian was asked,
Hmm.
"When were you saved?" And typically, when that question is asked, "When were you saved?" you think, "Oh, when I was baptized. Oh,
Right, right,
at this meeting, at this
right, right.
evangelistic series, at a
Hmm.
Vespers." And the theologian said, "I was saved in the year AD 33, and that is
Hmm.
the year that Christ was
Hmm.
crucified."
Hmm.
And that's when we measure history by, or that
Right,
historic moment.
right, right, right.
And it's communicating the idea that salvation is not dependent on when you accept it. Salvation has always been dependent on when
Hmm.
Christ paid for your salvation, and that is with
Mm.
the death of Jesus. And for
Right.
those
That's good.
that as you think about the religious experience that you may have, some people will be like, "Wait, why does death have to? Why? What's the role of death?" And this, the idea goes to this: that sin, the rebellious nature of sin,
Hmm.
always leads to death. And instead of us dying because we're sinners,
Mm.
Jesus died on the cross,
Yeah.
and he is our substitute or our savior, right? That's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Savior. He saved us. And the tweet was saying that salvation is dependent on when Jesus did it, not when you accept it. Now, with that being said, so if you are religious, if you're a devout Christian, and you are trying to stay away from heresy, that idea that is very prevalent in Adventist culture,
Mm.
you're gonna be like, wait, but it also Jesus died for everyone's sins, but you gotta accept it. And
Hmm.
I would say, duh. But the point is,
Said, duh.
still at the end of the day,
Yeah.
salvation happened on AD 33, and that is why then we accept it as a gift, and that's something that we're going to
Yeah,
discuss.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good, man. It's kind of like, it's always been on the table, right? Whereas sometimes I think the conversation can be like, well, I decided, and there is that decision part, right? We sing the song, I have decided to follow Jesus, and all this, but there is like this. I love that, when were you saved? 80-33, right? When Jesus paid the price, right? We've kind of talked about the great conflict, the fight between good and evil, and as you said, right, the Bible teaches that there is two ways to live your life, right? One that is the way that God wants, right, which is a life full of abundance and love. Another one that is selfish and that is about self-preservation,
Mm.
and if you follow in that one, in trying to preserve yourself. We talked about it. We talked a little bit about this in our conversation about what if, and the Doctor Strange conversation, right, where he wanted to control the world and really change how things were happening, and he ends up really becoming the center of this world that is broken, and it enslaves him, right,
Mm.
in that episode. And so that kind of happens, right, when you have this life of self-preservation and selfishness, you lead to just I don't know, to death and to an unhappy life, because the fabric of this, of what life is supposed to be like through the eyes of God and how He designed it, is one that is supposed to be of service and of love towards others beyond
Yeah,
ourselves, right? So you
yeah,
have that there. And so obviously, in the story of the Bible, you find Adam and Eve in the first couple of chapters of this book already with the problem, right? A perfect world where there's a perfect God and perfect humans. There is this doubt brought in that, oh, maybe He doesn't give everything that you want. And that's what the serpent, who is Satan, presents. And so they fall, and then they choose themselves over God. And that leads to this predicament that Jesus answers in 80-33 by coming and living a perfect life in our behalf, right? So yeah, I love that. Going back to that, right? So it's kind of like the food's on the table. The salvation's already there for you, for everyone. It's just you
yeah.
really saying, hey, is this what I want, right? Do I want this life? Do I want this instead, or do I want what I want, which was the decision that Adam and Eve had? What do I want? Do I want to follow God and what He's promised, or do I believe there's more out there that is outside of Him that would make me happier?
It's interesting how we give this background that is
Hmm.
super important in
Yeah.
your understanding to understand the sacrifice of or what Jesus did on the cross.
Hmm.
And the reason why Jesus makes it conditional in the sense that He is our Savior, but you have to have the condition is you have to accept it, is
Hmm.
because He's not going to violate the freedom
Yeah, that's
that
good.
you have to
Hmm.
live without Him or try to live without Him or to reject Him. And it's interesting because at the end of the day, the sole reason why people are able to live is because of God, and it's not that
Hmm.
God is killing people, but sin always leads to death, and
Hmm.
that is the idea that is communicated, and for me, Ephesians 2:8. I'll read
Hmm.
it to you. You can look
Yeah,
it up
go.
in your Bibles. Ephesians 2:8 is one text that can give you a good understanding. And for Seventh day Adventists, if you are part of our tradition or if you're not, um, regardless of what denomination you come from or what denomination you grew up in, it's very important to understand the Bible as a whole, not
Mm.
in bits and pieces. So when I bring up Ephesians 2:8, it's one example of many, but one that comes to mind that can communicate a clear idea. So it's not in it of itself the only text, it's a good text. Okay, so I had
Mm.
to share that for my own mind, for my
Yeah,
own
yeah,
sanity.
yeah.
Okay, so in the English Standard Version, Ephesians 2:8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing;
Mm.
it is the gift of God." The New Living Translation says, "God saved you by His grace when you believed, and you can't
Mm.
take
Mm.
credit for this. It is a gift from God." And
I like
when you
that. That's
read
good.
different versions,
Hmm.
BibleHub.com is one of the best websites for
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
When you read different versions, in the first half of the text, there's a little like differences. There's differences on the words that they've chosen, but the end part is really
Hmm.
straightforward. There aren't that many differences, which is salvation is a gift from
Yeah.
God.
That's good. That's good.
Salvation. So when you receive a gift,
Mm-hmm.
someone pays for it, someone wraps it
Mm-hmm.
up, someone puts a
Yep.
bow on it, and they give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reality is, do you accept the gift? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever not accepted a gift? I I don't I don't think so. I mean, I don't like
Any gift
because
that comes your way, you're like, that's mine. I'm taking it. I'm
let's
opening it.
go. Let's go. Pastor Appreciation Month. Any gift? Let's go.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna put our addresses in the link, so in
we'll put
the show notes,
our Cash App and
our
Venmo,
cash app, so you can send us some pastor
Zelle,
appreciation. No,
whatever.
I'm kidding.
That's a joke. But the idea is it's a gift. What does that communicate to you, Sebastian?
Bro, that's beautiful, man. I'm just trying to think. I'm picturing that right, where it's like, I love Christmas, or even anytime you would reach, get a gift. Let's say in pastor appreciation, someone sent you something. The only way, the only thing that's required of you, the recipient of a gift, is for you to, like you said, whether it's if it's boxed up or wrapped up, to unwrap it, right? Just literally to kind of, and sometimes that's kind of, I mean, you wouldn't even consider
That's
it
good.
work. It's
That's
more of
good.
discovery, right? You're more of like, oh wow, what is this, right? I got this new jersey, Lakers jersey, or I don't know, I
Hint,
got
hint.
this new, I got this new Bible. They gave me these fruits. I got a fruit basket the other day. All it requires of you is just to really like unwrap it, and you're like, wow, and that's it, right? Like the moment, like it's kind of technically already in your possession, right? Even before you really know what the contents are in it, right? Like, this is my gift. But the way that at the time that you really enjoy the benefits of it is when you open it up, right? And you see it, you pull it out, and you're like, oh, this is awesome, this is great. And it really just shows, like, and when you think about kids receiving gifts, there really is, nothing in that they do to bring that gift to the table, right? Even when you're a kid, right, and you would buy gifts to other kids, for Christmas or their birthdays, it was your parents' money, right? You would be like, here is your gift. Did you buy it? I didn't buy it. Sometimes that's what happens with husbands, right? Our wives do all the shopping or whatever, and they buy the gift. And I remember my dad and my mom always having that funny situation where they would do, like, at work, at the clinic, they would do a Secret Santa, and my mom would buy the gifts for her person, and my dad would, and for my dad. So when it was my dad's turn to give the gift, he would look at my mom and say, "Who do I have?" Right? Because as I didn't buy the gift, and then he would go take, and that one, and he would go, and he was just as surprised to see what was in it as the person opening it, even though he was the one that was giving the
That's
gift.
hilarious.
So it's fun, so in that sense, right? That's the beautiful thing. And I love that you brought that out, that though there's different ways that they interpret, that translate the beginning part, right? For it is by grace, that through faith, or, however they say it, for by grace, I mean that this, whatever. The last part all mentions the gift of God is the salvation. And to me, reminds me this other verse in Romans 3, Romans chapter 3, which is kind of in a nutshell what we've been talking about. Let me just look it up here on my Bible. And Paul is making the case of just kind of what we're talking about. What is true salvation? And in Romans 3:23 and 24, he kind of breaks down what we've been talking about, which is that all people have sinned and fallen short of God's glorious standard, right? So it's kind of like this like doctor saying, hey, yo, you're all infected with cancer. Like, there's not a bone in you or part in you that's not infected. Like, everything about you is just messed up. He's saying, look, every person has sinned. And if you read this chapter, he's making a case that everyone, like, there's no matter if you're a Jew, if you're a Christian, if you're a gent, like, whoever you are, you're all sick. And then he says in verse 24, yet God in his grace freely gives us and makes us right in his sight. He did this through Jesus Christ when he freed us from the penalty of our sins, which is what you've been saying, right? So it's, again, the gift, right? Everyone has fallen according to the Bible, right? Now, you may not subscribe to what the Bible teaches, but what we believe as followers of the Bible is not, and this is not to scare us. It's just to really reveal, right? Like the gift, reveal the true condition of our hearts, as we see that we're selfish, that we're broken, that we think we know what's best for us, but that ends up leading us to more hurt and more pain. And we're all falling short. And if we try to make, God happy and earn our way to heaven by what we do, it's all messed up and dirty. But the only way we can do that is simply by saying, yo, I accept, right? So
Yeah. So now we gave two instances in scripture that present salvation as a gift, as something that's outside of us,
Yeah. Yeah.
So naturally, there are misunderstandings
Mm-hmm.
within
Mm-hmm.
religious groups that they may not truly agree with us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is salvation? What isn't salvation, Sebastian? That idea.
Mm.
Um, I can go ahead if you. I have an
Yeah.
idea,
Go ahead.
but
Go ahead. Yeah.
for
Yeah. That's
me,
true. That's
is
true. That's good.
salvation is not a passport. Like
Ooh. Okay.
salvation is not a how can I say, a passport that you buy.
Mm-hmm.
So these ideas of imagery and um, different ways of thinking about it, they have their limitations. So don't
Yeah. Yeah.
subscribe and say pastor is saying this and
Yeah.
it's heresy.
Nobody should have a passport because it means that you're
No,
anti-God or
no, no,
something.
no.
Yeah.
So when you're fighting for a passport, and I know
Mm-hmm.
you travel internationally, Sebastian, and I
Mm-hmm.
do too, you have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay for it. The government's
Mm-hmm.
not going to pay for it. They're going to
Right.
give it to you,
Right.
but you have to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you pay for it, you then wait the 3 months that it takes for them to give you
Mm-hmm.
the document, and then you're able to travel. So
Yeah.
salvation is not a passport that you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
give money for
Mm-hmm.
and get that and issue that, and then you go to heaven. Like I
Yeah.
remember growing up hearing the idea that the Bible is an acronym, and the Bible stands for basic
Basic
instructions
instructions
before
before
leaving
leaving
Earth,
Earth. Yeah.
and salvation is a way to leave Earth, and
Mm,
you
yeah.
do the right things, and
Wow.
then you go to heaven. I
Hmm.
mean, we all there's that idea is
Mm-hmm.
heavily um, present in our culture, and
Yeah.
even those
Yeah.
that don't subscribe to be active Christians.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So
That's good.
the reason I say it's not a passport is because then that's dependent on you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I believe that salvation, when Jesus saves you, when he died on the cross and he has saved you,
Mm-hmm.
that's a gift that you
Mm-hmm.
receive and you have to accept it.
Yeah.
You don't pay for your gifts. Like on Christmas Day, for those that celebrate Christmas in the traditional uh, American way, you don't. When someone gives you a gift, and let's say they gave you a new wallet,
Mm-hmm.
when you receive that wallet, you don't pay the other person and say, "Oh, hey, thank you for the gift. Here's." You accept it. That's all you do. You just accept it,
It's true.
right?
It's true.
So that that is not salvation. Now,
Yeah.
it's super tempting to make salvation that, because, like Ephesians 2:8 says, salvation is totally outside of your influence. It's
Mm.
a gift. So you can't say, I've done this, I've done that.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
you give me. You can't
Yeah. Yeah.
extort
Mm-hmm.
God. You can't
Right.
force him to save you.
Right. Right.
What do you think, Sebastian?
Dude, yeah. I mean, you're just talking about your illustration about the passport got me thinking, right? Beautifully, you can't earn it, you can't buy it, right? And I recently, oops, I dropped my charger, but I recently just got a Mexican passport, right? And so very simple process. In the same day, went, got it, and came back. But not only do you have to buy the passport, but you have to prove that you were born in the country that you bought it in, right? And so this kind of happens with the Jews. It even happens with people in the church, where you think that you have higher merits or higher connection because, one, you were born in the church, or your parents were this. It happened when Jesus showed up. The Jews believed that they were better than others simply because they were Jews, right? And so then you're saying, okay, well, salvation is only for the Jews, and only those people that were born and have that have the passport, right, have purchased it by their dedication and how committed they are and how they've learned and memorized all these things. Those are the ones that have salvation. So I love that beautiful point. I would also add that it isn't a belief, as we've been sharing, without Jesus at the center, right? There's some people that will take Jesus out and say, yeah, Jesus died for us, but if you don't give 100% and all this, then the focus really becomes on you accomplishing and doing or not doing, and instead of Jesus. And that's what, maybe it's so hard because we live in a location, in a world where there's nothing that is truly free, right? We talk about, and we joke, free 99. nothing truly is free. Something's always going to require, this. Okay, read the fine print. And usually, many times in the church, I feel like we major on the fine print, right, rather than which we make up our own fine print. Hey, you can't lose out of this if you're not. I mean, we say like, okay, Jesus does save you, but just know you need to do this, and that, because yeah, I mean, we kind of go, this is kind of like, the big things he just says, but underneath we write our own fine print and say, okay, no, but you have to do this, and that. And so again, like you said, it isn't a means by which we go to heaven by our own merit, by our own accomplishments, by our own doing or undoings. And so I know that can kind of bring some questions, right? So my question would be like, so so
don't get me in trouble. Don't set me up to get in trouble.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
No,
but if you can't gain it, it's a good, right? Because this conversation leads to this, right? So if you can't gain it yourself, can you lose it?
Yeah. That's a good question.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because we're saying you can't gain it, right? It's a gift. And as we're using that, illustration, passport, the gift, can you lose it?
Yeah,
you've been a pastor longer than I, so I'm going to leave you for that, man. That's you.
I remember having a conversation with a dear church member. There's good people in a lot of churches, but that doesn't always mean that good people always make the right choices or say the right thing.
Ooh, okay.
And he was telling me about someone that he was concerned about. He said, I don't want him to lose his salvation. And that is saying that our salvation is conditioned by what we do, either by ignorance or by actual choice. So the way that I would present it is we, in the purest sense of the salvation being a gift, people do not lose salvation. They reject salvation.
Okay.
And I say this because when we have this idea that we lose salvation, and this has happened in our denomination, albeit fringe, or may not even be fringe, it may be more in the middle, whatever the case is. Like, people have thought that eating a donut, I've had someone to tell me, if I eat a coffee, I may lose my salvation. Like, he had this
guilt, this deep fear,
shame, right? So I share this to say, in its truest sense, you reject salvation, you don't lose it. And this helps me understand the judgment and the consequences of sin at the end of human time, of the sinful human timeline. Because if God is going to, let's say drinking coffee is true, is the cutoff point for God. Okay, let's just be hypothetical and say, if you drink coffee, you're not going to heaven. How ugly of a God would we serve if he will eliminate someone's existence because they drink a caffeinated drink? Like, that is not a loving God.
Right.
Now, this gets really touchy with people because, wait, where do you draw the line? If you subscribe to worshiping on Sunday, this is the thing. Salvation is totally dependent on God, who is the judger. Don't be thinking that you know who will be saved, because then you put yourself in the place of God, and that is a big no-no.
And God speaks about that a lot, right? Jesus does. Even in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks in Romans 5, 6, and 7, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and he's like, "Yo, just don't judge." Because first of all, you don't, you think you're looking clearly, but you have a whole plank, a whole piece, a 2x4 coming out of your your eye, and you're trying to help your brother that has like a little speck in their eye, right? Like a little, and he's like, look, you can't see the things that I see. You can't, you don't know the things of the heart, like he says when David is being chosen king, hey, look, man looks at the outside, but God looks at the heart. So I think that's a good way that you put it. Another way that I've seen it, and I was trying to look it up here on some notes I had, from some conversations I had had earlier in our Sabbath school class at the church, and it was just kind of the idea of like marriage, right? When you get married to someone and you're journeying with them, you don't, divorce that person the moment something happens, right? So you said, let's just say I wake up, the dishes weren't washed, and Chantal gets mad at me. You were supposed to wash the dishes yesterday. And it's like, we're done, right? And in the movies, you might have that. There might be some relationships that are as fickle or as, I don't want to say shallow, but there are along those lines, right? And she's like, we're done. And then we go to the courthouse and we're like, we're done. We're getting a divorce, right? And then I come back and okay, no, I'm sorry. All right, let's get married again. And then the next day, now Chantal does something or doesn't do something, right? And she didn't take the dogs out, so someone peed here in the house. I go, you know what? We're done, and in and out, And so this idea, and I think it's sometimes how we see our faith, right? It's just like, am I going to lose it today? And in reality, if you look at it, we've talked about this too, right? A relationship is a choice. There are days you wake up, you're upset, you're not feeling it, you don't want to love the other person, but what do? You choose to love the other person. And we don't get that from, oh, we're just exceptional human beings. We get that because that's the love of God. You look at all the Old Testament, I'm sure there were moments where God was like, yo, these people are getting on my nerves, but I love them and I choose to love them. And so we have to begin to see, I think, our this salvation more along those lines. And I love that you said that, right? It's not that you lose it, but that you reject it, right? And so at some point in our relationships, and you may find this, right, when we talk about uh, marriages falling away and breaking apart and divorce and all this, there is some level of, whether you want to say, infidelity or adultery, some breaking of what we would call the covenant of marriage, right? This promise, hey, I promise I'm going to be with you, and you promise I'm going to be with you. But I don't begin to doubt the promise that Chantal loves me when she doesn't wash the dishes or things like this, right? I may begin to doubt it when I find out that she went out and did something with someone else, or that she's been, lying and living this whole second life. And then I start seeing by her actions and what she says, yo, okay, this covenant that she promised to me, and that's kind of broken, right? So I think it's a good way to see it here, where in our salvation, there's so many people that if you were to ask them at church, are you confident in your salvation? They would be like, I don't know. I'm afraid, right? I'm afraid.
Especially as Seventh-day Adventists, we are conditioned to not think that way because
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because of our understanding of the law, and this is
Yeah.
where Romans. I'm going through Romans for my own, walk with the Lord, and in Romans 2, Paul makes the argument that if you are judging others, that same judgment that you're putting on others will be on you, and you yourself do those things that the other person doesn't do, like isn't doing right, or whatever the case is. And it's creating this dynamic where people can get so caught up on what they're doing or not doing that it creates this toxic situation. And if you are in a committed relationship, whether that's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
both in marriage or in dating or fiance or whatever situation you find yourself in, and your relationships dynamic or um, overall setting is dependent on a few things, like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't take out the trash,
Right.
or you didn't put the milk back after you took it out of the fridge, whatever the case is. If it's so, if it's so, like you said, not superficial, but if it's so, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Brittle,
Okay.
then there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we, the premise of trending up is walking with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. It's a
If
journey. It's a journey.
you're journeying with God and you do something that you shouldn't have done, like I believe smoking is wrong, okay? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an ethically not good for your body, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you are doing it, all right, and you smoke. Can someone who smokes be saved? Now, I believe they can.
Mm.
Does that mean that they continue smoking? No. That means that when you smoke, it's like you fall on the ground. And when you fall on the ground, what should you do? It's like I tell my kids, my youngest right now is learning how to walk with shoes specifically. When he falls, I'm like, get up, and
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes he cries, and I do my best to be patient because I'm not a patient person.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is when you do something that you shouldn't have done, you get up, you say,
Mm.
I made a mistake, and you go forward.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's important to understand.
It goes back to that relationship, right? Hey, Chantal, I'm sorry I didn't wash the dishes. And I understand how much that you love that, to have the dishes washed, X, Y, Z, right? And I also think it's important. Um, I heard it years ago when I was having my come to Jesus moment in the sense of, for those that are afraid and and they're struggling, like you're saying, right? Oh man, I've accepted Jesus, I got baptized, I've accepted his salvation, I've opened the gift, right? I'm God, use me, but I keep falling, I keep messing up, right? I keep not washing the dishes, right? If we contextualize it again, I keep not taking the trash out. The fact that you're struggling is a sign of life, is what I remember David Asher, just a amazing preacher, said. And we've been taking some concepts from Arise as well. But the fact that you're struggling is a sign of life, right? The fact that you're having this inside turmoil between I want to do right, but I don't do it. Paul talks about that in Romans. I want to do right, but I just can't do that. I'm not doing it because inside of me there's this desire for selfishness, for doing what I want, for getting things the way I want it, and it's fighting against my mind and my spiritual mind life that wants to do things differently in the way of God, in the way of the Bible, right? So the fact of the struggle in our life is a sign of life. And at the same time, he mentions that those that are doing bad and don't want God, they don't really think about like, oh, my conscience, I'm thinking about, is this good? You're just kind of thinking about how much more bad can I do, right? And so to me, like for those that maybe are thinking like, man, have I gone too far? The fact that you're having that thought to me speaks to me that the Holy Spirit is still working in you, that God still loves you, and it's still working in you. You are still holding on to that salvation, just like you are in that marriage. Even though, yeah, you've fallen, you've messed up. I haven't washed the dishes. I haven't done this. I haven't done this, and that. You are still married, and you are still trending up, right? That's why this is one of the reasons we picked this term, trending up, because we recognize that sometimes, if you're familiar with the stock market, I'm not too much, but things are going up, sometimes things go down. One morning you're up there, your stocks and what you've done is everything's great, and the next morning it's just lost all this money. But the beautiful thing in our spiritual journey is, with the help of God and every day committing ourselves to him, we begin to trend up, right? That doesn't mean you're always just on the up and up. It might mean that you might fall down a couple of times, as Edgar said, but you're trending up.
Yeah, another idea that I'm an imagery driven person, so
Yeah.
the way that I think about what you just mentioned is someone that's struggling to swim. When
Mm.
someone is in the water and they're not able to swim,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to show signs of that, right? It's they'll be flapping up like thrashing,
Mm-hmm.
and you throw the life, the what do you call it, the life
The
raft or
rife raft, yeah. The buoys and
the
the
buoy
yeah.
to the person, and then they're able to get on it and
Mm-hmm.
be able to breathe and not sink. But when someone has died, has drowned, there's no
Mm-hmm.
sign of struggle. There's no
Hmm.
sign of thrashing. They're just limp and dead. So the idea is, if you're struggling, um, you're in a good position because uh, there is right and wrong, and you want to do the right thing. You want to love God the right way. But there's times that we get in front of ourselves, like we cause our own problems, and regardless of the struggle, you're still loved.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless
Mm-hmm.
of what you're going through, uh, you're loved by God. And I say this because I have a lot of I know some people that have left Christianity, specifically
Mm-hmm.
Adventism, and they have this overwhelming feel of insecurity
Hmm.
and of self-hatred to what they've done or haven't done, and they still feel really anxious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying this I to bring the idea that you can make a mistake and still be loved by someone. And
Mm,
before God, despite all the mistakes that you've done now in the future, whatever the case is, you're still loved. And that can
that's
give you a
good. That's
peace
good. I love
in
that.
the way that you process
Hmm.
your walk and your experience.
Bro, you know what? And I'm going to keep saying this. We've talked about this. Hopefully, we've talked about all this, but I think it all depends on your view of God. You know, if you think God to be a vengeful, a an exacting God, a God that is like waiting for you to mess up, and maybe you've been in a relationship with that, right? Maybe your father, your mother, you had a grandparent that was like that, right? That it was like, I thought you were a good, and we're just waiting to hear, hey, you failed again, you messed up, and then it's like, well, you didn't look at the good. No, I don't care because you got a C in your grade. You should have gotten an A. Well, that was only. So maybe it all depends, and it comes down to our view of God, right? If we have a view of God that is, kind of the Adam and Eve, the view that was presented to Adam and Eve in Genesis 3 with the serpent is a God that was withholding good from them, right? You're telling me you can't eat from that tree, and in reality they could eat from everything except that one, right? Everything was off, was limited. It was not limited. Like it was just only one tree that was off limits. And so our view of God really dictates our view of salvation, a view of our church, a view of how we see others. And if we don't have a proper view of God, like you're presenting, right, a God that still loves you even in the moments that you don't even feel like you love yourself, or even in the moments where you don't feel lovable, is a God that is willing to go to the uttermost, and to the infinite most, to make sure that you are understand that you're loved, that you're living that life. But as you said, he doesn't violate our rights and saying, hey, I'm going to force you to be loved by me. No, no, no. He's like, I want to love you. And I know that my love and my way of life is the best way for you, but I'm not going to force you to live that or even accept it. I'm going to let you choose because it is, for it to be true love, it has to be the opportunity to say no. There has to be this freedom, as we've talked about. So we have to really consider, okay, what is my view of God? How do I view God? Is it a God that I'm seeking to try to get approval of? Or am I living from a place of approval already because he is a God of love and he sees me as a child as his child, right? So I think it comes down to a lot of that, our view of God.
Yeah, and I think that just highlights the idea that we carry a lot of baggage in our
Yeah,
way that
dude.
we
Yes,
process life.
yes, yes.
And I think about I think about like my own experience growing up and
Hmm.
my experience today as being a father. And there's a lot that you can really truly appreciate about God's character. And when I wake up in the mornings and I spend time with the Lord, with God, I get this renewed like sense of, man, like I try to really like be a good husband, a good
Mm,
father, a
mm,
good pastor, and there's limitations and moments in my life that I don't do enough, but yet
mm.
God does way more than I do, and He loves me regardless of where I'm at, and that's really important to understand. And
Yes, sir.
as we transition to our next step, I wanted to just say that tomorrow I'm going to the maximum state prison of New York called Attica. And
Mm,
only the worst of the worst criminals that have been deemed criminals go there. And I thought, I've been thinking about, what do I tell this inmate? He's been deemed, wrong and is now paying the time, doing the time.
mm-hmm.
And the question I asked my church that I was at the Sabbath is a question that I ask you, listener, is does God still love? Does God, it's funny how we say still love. No,
Mm-hmm.
does God love
Mm,
the inmates? The
mm,
inmates at Attica?
mm,
Yes, he does.
mm-hmm.
Does that mean that he has a get out of free jail card? No. But that means that our love, that the love that God has for us is not dependent on our actions, but dependent on Him as
Mm.
our Father. That's why God presents Himself as Father.
Yeah.
So, as we're discussing this, why
Mm-hmm.
is it important to understand like our value and our identity in Jesus?
Yeah, man. I think it's key, and I think this is where the Bible presents kind of an answer to our society, right? And many times what you do when you're looking for, when you go to your professions, right? We kind of, even talking about work, we identify with it, by what I do. We don't ask people, how are you? We talk about, what do you do for a living, right? Because yeah, our value, our identity comes by what we can perform, what we can do. And many times we struggle with an identity crisis because we don't know, let's just say I'm a pastor in a couple of months, or let's just say that's another thing I could do, a physical therapist. Let's say I'm a physical therapist, and I get in a car accident, and I lose both my hands. Okay, well, what am I? Am I still a physical therapist? I can't. I mean, I could still do stuff, right? But I'm kind of limited because there's a lot of hands-on work on that, right? So then I can have an identity crisis because I'm like, hey, my whole life I thought I was going to be a physical therapist, and now that I'm hindered or limited, who am I? And I think that this in this be understanding the salvation and understanding that what the Bible presents, it says, look, before you even do and perform, you are already considered worthy, and in God's value system, it is not what you do, but who you are that brings worthy and worth to you, and value. And that's beautiful, man. I think that just takes away from the desire and the need to prove yourself to this world. Obviously, now, like I was saying, you're living from a place of approval already, rather than going to a place of approval, right? You're already operating as if you are a son, rather than trying to earn your sonship or your daughtership, right? And I think that's key and fundamental what we're talking about here. And it goes back to your view of God. If you think God to be someone that requires you to prove yourself, then you're going to think, and you're going to be acting out of fear. But if you know that God is a good father, then now you're living out of the reality that you are a son, you are a daughter, that you are saved. And rather than looking, okay, what can I do to be unsaved, because I'm afraid that if I do that I will be unsaved, you're just confidently walking. I mean, Edgar, have you ever had the thought of, with your kids, what could I do to potentially be not their father, right? Well, what action could I do to be like, I'm no longer their father? I mean, I never had that conversation or that thought with my parents. What would I do to know to that would cause
That's
my
good.
parents to say,
Yeah.
"You're not my son,"
Yeah.
right? And
Good point.
really, you never had that conversation, because especially if you have a healthy relationship, because you know that there's nothing you can do that will negate you from being a son. You just are a
Yeah.
son. And now you're
Yeah.
just living life. You don't even have that conversation. Am I a son today? Mom, do you still love me? You
Yeah.
know, right? The same thing with you as your kids. Is there anything that I could do? What if I mess up? What if I scream too hard? Then
Hmm.
he's gonna look at me, and that he's gonna know that, hey, I'm still his dad. I'm still his father. He's still my son, right? So if we're able to see that in that view of God and understand that, I think it would change the way we really even talk about this conversation.
The way that I think about my religious experience, and this changed over the years for the
Mm-hmm.
better. I used to think that in the mornings for my devotionals, I am looking for God and spending time with Him. But
Mm.
what if we were to look at our devotional times, our times of faithfulness, or wanting to talk with Him in prayer and study in church? What if we were to look at it as God wanting to be with us first
Mm.
and foremost? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not looking for God, God is looking for me, and I
Mm-hmm.
respond to that love.
Yeah, that's
And I
it.
think that's
That's it.
really important to comprehend. I also believe that salvation is important to understand for worship, because the word worship is supposed to
Mm.
communicate worthiness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so we got to ask ourselves, we all put our worth in something, and
Mm-hmm.
some people choose their careers, their spouses, their fitness goals,
The
their
money
their money,
or
and that
lack
is
of,
what they
yeah.
worship or lack
Mm-hmm.
of. So when we worship God, I worship Him because He's so loving, and I
Mm.
give my ultimate worth to Him because He is my Savior. And we need to make sure that we communicate this without the idea that God is some kind of abuser that's trying to hook us
Mm.
on to make us spend time with Him. No,
Mm-hmm.
this is a love relationship, a
Mm-hmm.
agape relationship where He is loving us and wants to be with us, and that
Mm-hmm.
is at the center of our experience in worship, in the way that
Mm-hmm.
we talk
Mm-hmm.
to God.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, man. And you were talking about this earlier. I wanted to say this too, but just I think it's beautiful when Jesus talks with Nicodemus, right, the leader, and trying to break down what this new way of living, this new kingdom, right, what Jesus was all about, this salvation idea. He considers it a new birth, right? He says, "Look, your old self, right? That you're a grown man, bro." He tells Nicodemus, and you got to be born again. This is why Nicodemus says that in joking, right? What do you mean? I mean, you want me to go back into my mom's belly? Like, how can I do that? And he's like, no, 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 no. You got to be born again. But the idea is there, right? You are literally born again. This is what we talk about baptism, right? You're baptized and you're born again. You accept Jesus. It's like a new life. But it's interesting that Jesus compared it to being born again and not like you're transferring there's a career change like as you're older. No, because it's like, hey, you're literally a baby again, because you this whole way of living that you lived before, of what I was saying, right, selfish and for yourself and not loving others, now you have to unlearn that, and you're really learning kind of to walk again. What is the proper way of walking, right? I think about in physical therapy, Chantal will come back a couple times in the week and just tell me a little bit about some of the cases that she's bringing on and working, right? And you can think of those that maybe never learned how to properly walk, right? They're not walking with a proper gait pattern, and it's affected, their hips, which is fed the back and the knees, and they have pains. But then when you work on having a proper way of walking, it really changes the game. And they have less pain, but you are literally having to learn how to walk again,
Yeah.
right? And that takes
Yeah.
time, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the idea of salvation here, right?
Good
You
point.
open up this gift, and it's a new way of living, a new way of seeing yourself that we're talking about here, right? New perspective of yourself, that you have value and identity. It's a new way of looking at God. It's a new way of looking at others around you. And I think, to me, and this I think really connects with Sabbath, that we'll talk about soon, right? The gift of the Sabbath, which is it's a day, and I don't want to give away the juiciness of it, a day where you can just stop, and you don't have to prove your worth to your work, to your spouse. You don't have to prove. You just stop and rest in the assurance that you are enough,
You're
that
enough.
you are loved, and that the work that needed to be done has already been done for you, right? That's the beauty of this salvation. And I think it should give us, instead of fear, am I saved? That coffee that I drank this morning, oh no. It's like, no, bro, no, girl, like, you are loved by God, right? And he has this gift for you. All you got to do is say, I want that. I want that, right? And so, yeah, what do you think, Edgar? How does this speak to maybe the currents or the needs of our society today? Like, how would this, maybe how we're presenting it, speak to those that are maybe aimlessly working to prove themselves in life and society?
So, without getting too cheesy, in our time in life,
Hmm.
social media has a big impact in people's mental health and people's just world. And it was something that I realized was that there's influencers, there's people who make money off of social media because they have something that attracts people to follow their lives. And typically that person's good looking or they're talented or whatever the case
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
And that is why people then are attracted to them. But before the eyes of the creator God,
Hmm.
God doesn't love you because you are the best looking person. God doesn't love
Hmm.
you because you are very athletic. God doesn't love you because you are an influencer. God loves you
Hmm.
because of who you are in the flesh. And this is not supposed to make a narcissistic person, but this is supposed to make someone understand that their value doesn't come from what they've done, but comes from
That's
God
good.
loving them. Like, think
That's
about
good.
this. If the most powerful person on this planet were to give attention to someone,
Hmm.
wouldn't you think that that someone that they're giving attention to is special?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now think about the God of this universe, the God that exists
Mercy.
outside of time, outside of
Mercy.
material space.
Hmm.
He wants to be with us. That,
Wow.
and it's not
Wow.
dependent on what we've done, but it's
Wow.
dependent on who we are.
Hmm.
And first and foremost, that's really impressive.
Yeah, man. And it takes the emphasis outside of yourself, right? Which we always say, how, but the more you get closer to the true revelation of Jesus through the Bible, you begin to be like, man, it's easy. You know what I'm saying? It's so easy. And I think C.S. Lewis says, I don't know, I'm not sure who, maybe C.S. Lewis, but he said it's it's easier to get saved than to be lost because God makes it so easy. And we complicate things because we want to obviously, have boundaries and set here and we want to make this like inside or outside idea. Okay, you got it, I don't got it. And the reality is that Jesus is like, yo, worry about yourself. Paul talks about this, and we misuse it. He's like, hey, work out your salvation with trembling and fear. And I think he talks about that in Philippians. And people kind of say that, hey, sí, tienes que ver, cuidadito, you got to be careful with trembling and fear. But then he goes on to say, because it is God who works in you to both will and to do for his good pleasure, right? So he's just saying, hey, yo, just relax, man. Don't try to, focus on yourself, but you got to realize that the one that's working in you is God, and he's going to give you the desire to do good and the ability to do it. And at the end of the day, man, it's just you kind of feel like a kid again, right? Being born again. Man, what can I do? My parents are giving me the money to buy the gift for my friend. They're wrapping it. All I'm doing is like, here you go, bro. Oh, thanks, man. And the same thing when we receive the gift of God, all we're doing is just open up your hands. You gotta open up your hands, receive that gift, and it's yours, right? So it's a beautiful lesson here. Edgar, any last thoughts here on salvation?
I hope that each one of us has this assurance before God that he loves us. And typically, if you love someone, you're going to save them from whatever bad they're going through, anything bad they're going through. Like, if I know, Sebastian, that my wife is going to hurt herself, I'm going to try everything that I can to stop it. So when you understand that God loves you and he saves you, you don't think he's gonna you don't think he's gonna have that like as a base, like in the back of his mind. So we need to trust that God is a good God, that God is someone you can trust, that God is someone that he is faithful to you, that he is down to earth, that he loves you without any intent of getting something in return.
Yeah, that's good.
That's powerful.
That's powerful, bro. That is powerful. That's beautiful, man. And we just encourage you, to just do your own soul searching and asking, okay, what is my idea of salvation, right? Do I have salvation? Am I saved? Have I thought about that, right? What is my view of God in terms of every day, right? When I mess up, do I feel like I'm a step closer to being out, or am I just in a journey that I'm trying to trend up, as we're talking about, and knowing that God is with us, he's patient with us, he loves us. He who did not spare his own life, right? Paul talks about in Romans, but willingly gave up Jesus, gave up his son, right? How much more will he not give us all things? So we have a God that is for us, even at the expense of his own life. And if that doesn't speak something, man, I don't know what does, right? That's the best movie right there. So hopefully this conversation was valuable. We'll continue on our Foundations series for the next couple of episodes, but we appreciate you tuning in as we've talked about salvation, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's important for us today. And so our duty, our homework for you guys is just to think on that, right? Take some time to think on your salvation. Think about how you would share it with someone else. Think about what is your view of God, and just take the time to be like, man, because as you've seen, right, as the podcast episode has gone on, we just got more excited just thinking about this, right? We're like, man, this is cool, man. This is so good to be true. And so we hope that that's your experience in your journey as you trend up. Hope to hear you guys and see you guys next time. Enjoy it, and we'll talk and hear you guys soon. Peace.